We're excited to be with you today to provide information and tips on application submissions for the Just Grants for the campus program. My name is Maria Cristina Pacheco Alcalá, and I am a grant management specialist and member of the campus unit. My co-presenter today is Veronica Murud, grant management specialist too. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our team. Our supervisor is the Associate Director, Darlene Johnson, and our unit team lead is Latinisha Lewis. The remaining grant management specialists on the campus unit are Jessica Neal and Kimberly Schamberger. Our wonderful support staff is Essen Dickens, our grant administrative specialist, and we also have joining us today Michael Sterling, who's the grants financial expert that will talk to you more. Next slide. The purpose of the pre-application information session is to highlight a few key points in the solicitation. However, it is not the intent nor there is sufficient time to go over every aspect of the solicitation. Therefore, the agenda for this session is to cover changes in the program, eligibility requirements, key submission information and deadlines, program information, including requirements, federal award information, application components, and tips for submission. Next slide. All applicants are responsible for reading the FY2023 campus solicitation and the OVW solicitation companion guide to ensure that a complete application is submitted. OVW staff cannot comment on the quality of an applicant's proposed project or provide any information outside of what is included in the solicitation. However, campus program staff will be available to respond to questions about the application requirements throughout the period that the solicitation is open. Please feel free to send questions to campus mailbox at ovw.campus@usdoj.gov. At the end of the webinar, this PowerPoint and script will be available on OVW's website, and a link to the recorded webinar will be available in approximately 14 days. Materials will be posted in both English and Spanish once translated. Before we get started, you may find it helpful to have the campus solicitation in front of you for a point of reference during this information session. There is a lot of information to cover, so we will stop periodically to allow for questions. However, there will be a moment when we will need to move on to ensure all information is covered before the end of this webinar. We may be unable to address all the information included in the PowerPoint. However, the slides will be posted for your reference. We will ask that you submit all questions in the chat box to ensure we can capture them. We will read the question aloud so all participants know which question we are responding to. We will also try to not repeat the question if already been answered, so your attention to the questions and answers is important. Lastly, please don't jump ahead and ask questions that have not been covered, as we are sure that as we continue the webinar, your questions will be answered, or you will have the opportunity to ask a question. Next slide. If you are familiar with the campus program, either as a prior recipient of funding or as a previous year applicant, there are numerous changes that we want to highlight in the FY23 solicitation. Many of the changes are the result of the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization of 2022. But other changes were made to reduce the amount of information requested in the application submission. The first change to note is that we have removed the consortium project type. In this solicitation, you can apply as a single institution only. If you were previously awarded as a consortium, we are no longer supporting that project type this year. In addition, there are 3 new statutory purpose areas in the solicitation, which expands the activities that can be funded. The first one is focused on training campus health centers and appropriate faculty on how to recognize and respond to gender-based violence. The second is focused on training of campus personnel on how to use victim-centered, trauma-informed interviewing techniques. And the third is to develop and implement restorative justice practices. These new purpose areas are exciting new efforts to undertake, and we look forward to seeing what campuses propose in their applications to address these. Another set of changes are the statutory minimum requirements for prevention and student conduct. Prior to FY2023, one of the statutory requirements was to provide mandatory training for incoming students. This year and beyond, the requirement has changed to provide mandatory training for all students. In the solicitation, we have outlined 3 ways you must demonstrate that you've trained all students. For the requirement to provide ongoing training for all disciplinary boards, these trainings have been updated to reflect current campus personnel that conducts investigations and hearings, as well as expand who should be trained. As such, the requirement for FY2023 and beyond is to provide ongoing training to all the participants in the resolution process, including the Campus Disciplinary Board, the Title IX Coordinator's Office, and the Student Conduct Office. The remaining set of changes reflect programmatic updates. First, the award amounts were increased from $300,000 to $400,000 for 36 months. Second, the indirect cost rate limits remain, but were increased from 10% to 20%. Third, the mandatory OVW TA allocation was increased from $40,000 to $60,000 for 36 months to account for the increase in travel expenses and to include travel to the new grantee orientation. And 4, reduced and changed criteria required in the application submissions in the following sections: what will be done, who will implement, and memorandum of understanding. If you are building your current submission based on an old application that you developed, please pay attention to these sections as the requested information has changed. It is important to review this solicitation so you don't lose unnecessary points in the application review because you didn't realize that new or different information is being requested. Next slide. Now let's begin with the most important thing. Who is eligible to apply for grant funding? Eligibility is mentioned on the cover of the solicitation as well as on page 16. Next slide. Eligible applicants are limited to institutions of higher education. OVW is required to ensure equitable distribution of grants to historically Black colleges and universities and tribal colleges and universities. In addition, the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization of 2022 included a 10% set aside for HBCUs and a 50% set aside for Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges, and HBCUs. While most of the funding directed to these institutions will be utilized in a special initiative called Strengthening Culturally Specific Campus Approaches to Address Domestic Violence, Dating Violence, Sexual Assault, and Stalking Initiative, the campus program will also ensure that we meet these priorities in the solicitation. So we would love to see more of these institutions apply for funding for either solicitation. Next slide. All the applicants under the campus program must submit 2 certification letters. If applicable, a 3rd certification must be submitted if an applicant proposes to provide legal services as part of the project or as part of victim services offered to survivors. All letters must be submitted on institution letterhead, signed and dated by the highest authorizing official. Example, President, Chancellor, Provost, or any designee with a similar authority of the institution of higher education. As such, generally, it should not be signed by the Chief of Police or Title IX office. The signatory must be designated by the President to sign on behalf of the university for any federal funding. First, the certification of eligibility. All applicants must certify in writing that they follow Section 485F of the Higher Education Act of 1965 as amended, which requires that all eligible institutions of higher education collect and report certain types of information about campus crime statistics and campus security policies for their respective campuses. A sample of certification of eligibility letter can be found on the OVW website. Second is the certification of statutory minimum requirements. All applicants must certify that they have knowledge of and are committed to the full implementation of each of the statutory minimum requirements of the campus program. Failure to provide both certification letters and include the incorrect signatures will disqualify an application from further consideration. The signed certifications letters must be uploaded as separate attachments in JUST grants. If an applicant is proposing to provide legal services as part of the project or victim services that will be provided, a third certification titled Delivery of Legal Assistance must be submitted. Since this is a new requirement because of the VAWA 2022, an applicant won't be eliminated during the initial review of the application. However, before an award can be made to an institution, this certification would need to be submitted. As such, if this certification is missing, OVW will contact an applicant during the review process to submit the certification letter only. The signed certification letter should be uploaded as a separate attachment in JUST grants. Some common mistakes that applicants make with regards to eligibility are incorrect signatures, incorrect certifications submitted, and missing one or both required certifications. And I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions at this point.
Hi, Maria Cristina. Yes, we have a question from Stacy Murphy. OVW priority areas, pages 9 to 10, notes several categories of colleges under advancing racial equity. The section later notes that of OVW funding, 50% is used for grants to HBCUs, HSIs, and TCUs. It appears that if an applicant is part of a different statutory category, they will still meet the criteria for this priority area. But does that also impact scoring? Maria Cristina, would you like to take that question, or anyone else in the team?
It won't affect the scoring. To address the priority areas is different than the type of institution that applies for the grant.
Great, thank you. There was also a question about if these slides will be available after. And as Latinisha already replied in the chat, yes, the slides will be available on OVW's website. Next question from Keith. Can you quickly re-identify the 3 new purposes, or which purposes they are on the RFA numbered list on pages 8 to 9? I guess maybe he means new purpose areas.
The 3 purpose areas are: 1, focus on training campus health centers and appropriate staff faculty to recognize and respond to gender-based violence. The second is focused on training of campus personnel and how to use victim-centered, trauma-informed interviewing techniques. And the third one is to develop and implement restorative justice practices.
Thank you. And also, as Jessica already replied also in the chat, is that we will get into the priority areas later in the presentation. Next question. Who would be qualified? I'm sorry, just jumped away. Who would be qualified signatory, provost versus president, for example? Does the highest ranking official always need to be a signatory?
The highest doesn't always need to be the designated person that signs the documentation, but they would need to be designated by the highest authorizing official to sign on behalf of the institution for any federal funding. So it should be the highest person.
Great. Thank you. Next question. For current consortium grantee, my understanding is that the consortium does not qualify for continuation funding because of the elimination of the consortium category. And as such, each institution in the consortium needs to apply as a new grantee. Can these new grantee applications reference the individual institutions' previous participation as a consortium separately? Is it allowable for some aspects of the program narrative to be the same among the institutions who were previously part of the same consortium? In this case, the lead institution will apply as a consortium, and the member schools will apply as new.
The lead institution would apply as a continuation application as a single applicant. And then the members of the consortium can apply as new grantees individually. And we only removed the consortium type of application for this year. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And they are allowed to include their experience as part of the consortium in the narrative. We will assess and evaluate as part of our review process each application individually, not with the connection that they were before part of a consortium.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. And we will talk more about it later on in the presentation as well. Next question. One of the requirements for mandatory prevention is to work in collaboration with culture-specific victim service providers. Page 15. What quantifies collaboration? For example, is it sufficient to review slides, or do these partners need to develop content? Ideally, the collaboration would mean that you would be developing content together in collaboration with the victim service provider. They would be part of your CCR team. Anyone else would like to add?
Yes, Veronica, this is Maria Cristina. They can develop content slides together, and they can also co-present together, because that's the organization that has the expertise, and that's their collaboration to the institution when they are doing a training with you.
All right. And next question. How are we to meet the mandatory requirement prevention for all students? I believe we will talk more about it later on in the presentation as we are jumping ahead here. Any more questions regarding the content that was already covered? All right, thank you. Maria Cristina, I believe we can move forward.
Yes, thank you. That's the next slide. Good. Okay, so In addition to the certification letters, there are two required partnerships. Without them, your application will be deemed ineligible and will not move forward in the peer review process. These partnerships must be reflected in the External Memorandum of Understanding, or EMOU. There must be at least one criminal justice agency, such as the local or tribal law enforcement agency, prosecutor's office, or court. Note that an applicant with sworn campus law enforcement or campus security officers is required to partner with a criminal justice agency from the jurisdiction or tribe in which the campus is located. If an applicant has non-sworn campus law enforcement or security officers, then the campus must partner with a local or tribal law enforcement agency. A campus may also partner with another criminal justice agency to strengthen their responses. And at least one domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking victim service provider within the community or tribe where the institution is located. For rural campuses, this may mean a victim service organization that serves multiple counties or is in another county. Eligibility is the area where many applicants make mistakes and are eliminated from further review. So in your application submission, make sure to address all of the required components. Next slide. Now we will begin to address key submission information. Next slide. The cover of the solicitation provides information on registering. Registration includes registering with the Systems for Award Management, SAM, and grants.gov systems, and registering with Just Grants. All applications must register with SAM and grants.gov by April 11, 2023. Organizations must update or renew their SAM registration at least once a year to maintain an active status. The average time to register with SAM is about 2 to 3 weeks. For grants.gov, the average registration time is about 1 week. As such, it is important to register with both systems as soon as you can to avoid the inability to apply. Registration with both systems should be completed before you can register with Just Grants. Second, applicants must register the entity administrator and the application submitter with Just Grants before the Just Grants deadline. Registration in Just Grants takes about 3 days. Within 24 hours of Just Grants receiving the SF-424 and SF-LLL from grants.gov, the applicant will receive an email from diamond.no-reply@usdoj.gov with instructions on how to create a Just Grants account. You can find more information related to registration and deadlines on pages 39 of the solicitation. Next slide. As you begin the application submission process, you may notice a change that your institution now has a unique entity identifier instead of using your DUNS number. On April 4, 2022, the federal government stopped using DUNS number and moved to the new Unique Entity ID, SAM, known as the UEI. The Unique Entity ID is a 12-character alphanumeric value, and once issued, will not change. Entities that are currently signed and registered in SAM.gov already have a Unique Entity ID, which can be viewed in SAM.gov. The transition to UEI, SAM, will not impact an entity's registration expiration date or when renewal is necessary. Next slide. It is important to note that there is two-step process submission. A complete campus program application has components of the application that will be submitted in both grants.gov and Just Grants. First, the SF424 and SFLLL, the disclosure of flooding, is submitted in grants.gov. The final deadline for submitting these two documents is May 4, 2023. If you do not submit these documents in grants.gov by the deadline, you won't be able to submit the remaining components of the application at all. This deadline will not be extended, so make sure that you submit these initial documents as soon as you can. It is a critical step to complete your application submission. The remaining application documents are submitted in Just Grants. The deadline for submitting the remaining documents is May 9, 2023. Remember, there are preliminary steps that must be taken before you can submit the remaining documents in Just Grants. Once registered in Just Grants, the application submitter will receive an email link to complete the rest of the application in Just Grants. The entity administrator also will need to log into Just Grants to review and invite the applicant's authorized representatives before an application can be submitted. More information on Just Grants roles is available on the Just Grants website. Remember to review the checklist on pages 46 and 49 to ensure you have submitted all required documents before finalizing your submission. Also, we want you all to make sure to review the solicitation. That's the document that includes all the final dates and deadlines. Latinisha, if you could go to slide 14. Okay, there we are. Okay, good. So applicants experience technical issues with Just Grants should contact the OVW Just Grants support desk as soon as possible. Please make sure to contact OVW's help desk that is provided in this PowerPoint and in the solicitation. There is another DOJ Just Grants help desk that exists, but reaching out to the OVW help desk will better support your ability to submit a timely application. If you experience any Just Grants technical issues, make sure that you continue to develop the proposal while you are working to address any issues. Applicants should follow the solicitation guidance regarding technical difficulties. This will enable you to submit a full proposal by the deadline using an alternate method if necessary. Next slide. Okay. Now that we have learned about the logistics of applying, let's switch to talk more about substantive components of the program funding. Next slide. The campus program encourages a comprehensive, coordinated community approach that enhances victim safety, provides services and support for victims, and supports efforts to hold offenders accountable. The funding supports activities that develop and strengthen trauma-informed victim services and strategies to prevent, investigate, and respond to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking on campus. The key thing to remember is that the previously mentioned crimes are the focus of this grant funding. As such, your proposal cannot address bullying or general violence because they are out of the scope for this program. In addition, sexual harassment can only be addressed when it is used as an umbrella term for these crimes, such as in the context of your campus policy. Next slide. The campus program has now 13 purpose areas because of VAWA 2022. You are required to select one purpose area, but can select more than one as it is relevant to the proposed project. We are not going to go over each one of them, but they can be found on pages 6 and 8 of the solicitation. Please note that the purpose areas 4, 6, and 7 have additional considerations. If you select purpose area 4, then several considerations are needed. You must allocate 20% of grant funding to this purpose to provide direct victim services. This doesn't include outreach and training activities. As well, if victim advocacy services include providing legal services, then the legal services certification must also be submitted with the application. Purpose Area 6 and 7 cannot make up most of the budget or the proposed activities. Since the goal of the program is to provide comprehensive approaches to these crimes, these purpose areas cannot be the only selected purpose areas. If your proposal includes items in Purpose Area 7, then if awarded, approval must be granted by OVW prior to the purchase of these items. Therefore, you can include these costs in your application submission. Now we will stop to answer any questions you may have about the purpose areas, deadlines, and submission applications.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. We have a few questions here coming in. Scrolling back here. Question, is it okay if the award amount listed on the SF-424 doesn't match the just grants budget exactly? Yes, the award amounts may differ. However, this will not impact your application submission. Next question. If SAM registration takes 2 to 3 weeks, is it possible to register for SAM and just grants by April 11th? Please follow the deadlines in the solicitation.
Hi, Veronica, this is Jessica. I will say that the applicant should register as soon as possible. You are able to register for just grants after the 11th. However, the applicant will need to be sure to address any technical challenges ASAP so that it does not impact their ability to submit an application.
Great. Thank you for the clarification, Jessica. Next question. Does that mean all applicants must address? I'm trying to figure out here. If you have a third-party campus security provider and an institutional director of campus security, does campus security sign the external MOU, the internal MOU, or both?
This is Maria Cristina. They would sign the internal MOU as they're providing a service that is part of the institution.
Great, thank you. Next question. I'm tweaking the question here just a little bit to make it better understandable. Applications that address purpose area 4, do they need to allocate at least 20%? I'm just trying to figure out this question. Does that mean all applications must address purpose area 4? Or do we only need to allocate at least 20% if we are including purpose area 4?
This is Maria Cristina. It is an institutional decision if they choose to address purpose area 4. If they choose to do so, then they do need to allocate at least 20% of their budget to support the work of purpose area 4.
Great, thank you. Next question. Did you say we should include at least a request for funds for lighting, or were you saying that we can include, but the approval to spend funds for this must be approved by OVW first? That is correct. It would have to be approved by the OVW first. Next question. For purpose area 7, applicant would get pre-approved and then would list the item in a proposal budget Is that correct? The purpose area 7. I have to see what was the purpose area 7. Maria Cristina, would you like to?
Yes, they need to list in the proposal the expenses that they would like to, and include them in their budget. And when we review, we will process that. But anyhow, they will still need to seek our approval prior to moving forward.
Right. Thank you. Regarding area number 11, if an applicant has an external vendor that provides health services on campus, is it allowable, desired to offer them training as well as campus faculty? Is training for an external partner / EMOU member an allowable expense for this grant?
This is Maria Cristina. As long as the health service provider is providing services for the campus, then it is an allowable expense to train them.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions right now, so I believe we can move forward.
Okay, next slide, Lati. Okay, so information regarding the FY2023 OVW priority area for the campus program can be found on page 9 of the solicitation. The selection of a priority area is optional for the applicants. Should you choose to select a priority area, then your application will be assessed based on the extent to which you meet it. Please be certain that you have reviewed the requirements for the priority area. Applications that adequately address these priority areas will be given special consideration during the recommendation process. The first priority area is to advance racial equity as an essential component of ending sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. To qualify for this priority area, the institution must be designated as one of the following: an Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander serving institution, Native American serving non-tribal institution, predominantly Black institution, Alaska Native serving institution, Native Hawaiian serving institution, historically Black college or university, tribal college or university, or Hispanic serving institution. You must be designated by the Department of Education as one of these institutions. You cannot be considered an emerging institution. The second priority area is to improve outreach services, civil and criminal justice responses, prevention, and supports for survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking from underserved communities, particularly LGBTQ and immigrant communities. To qualify for this priority area, an applicant must include in their proposal activities tailored to meet the identified underserved population or populations, relevant partnerships with community-based organizations with expertise in working with the identified underserved population or populations, and the budgetary resources to ensure accessibility of meetings or events and materials for the identified underserved population. For example, if you are proposing that your campus will work with students with disabilities, then the proposal should reflect the prevalence and dynamics of these crimes in this community, as well as specific activities that address the unique needs of students with disabilities who are also victims of these crimes. There should be activities to ensure events and materials are accessible for various disabilities, and there should be relevant partners whose expertise is working with people with disabilities and or victims with disabilities. One mistake that many applicants make is to simply repeat what is written in the solicitation and thus don't receive priority considerations due to the lack of details provided. Next slide. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. Please reference page 9 of the solicitation, as well as the solicitation companion guide for the list of these activities. We're not going to go through them one by one. Instead, to assist you with submitting a strong application and developing victim-centered projects, we are going to go over some of the ones that have caused applicants to receive point deductions during the application review. First, procedures or policies that fail to include conducting safety planning with victims. It is not enough to say that you will conduct safety planning with victims. A strong project will provide details on how safety planning is incorporated into response protocols, procedures, and policies, how and when safety planning is conducted with victims, what is discussed during the safety planning process, and the distinction between safety planning for domestic violence versus sexual assault versus stalking survivors. Another one is project designs and budgets that fail to account for the accessibility needs of individuals with disabilities, with limited English proficiency, or who are deaf or hard of hearing. Peer reviewers usually deduct points from the project narrative and the budget for applications that do not include information and/or designate funding on how the applicants will make their services and/or products accessible to individuals with disability, limited English proficiency, or deaf and/or hard of hearing. Please give this serious consideration when completing your application. Another example is failing to develop policies regarding confidentiality of information, informed consent, and mandatory reporting. This is another one that the peer reviewers routinely deduct points for during the peer review process. Having these policies in place not only protects the safety of the victim, but also enhances the working relationship between service providers and increase delivery of services to victims. Do not assume that peer reviewers will know that these policies exist because you're an institution of higher education. They are looking for information that details how victims' information will be protected, how you will obtain consent in accordance with best practices in the field, and what is your institutional policy on mandatory reporting. The only way for reviewers to know this is if they read it in your project narrative. Now I'll pass it on to Veronica to continue.
Thank you, Maria Cristina. We will continue with out-of-scope activities. The campus program has specific out-of-scope activities that cannot be supported with grant funds. To assist with submitting a strong application, here are a few of the most common ones that have caused past applicants to receive point deductions during the review process. Activities primarily focused on sexual harassment that do not involve domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. This out-of-scope activity was updated to reflect these crimes are now encompassed under sexual harassment in Title IX. It is important to emphasize that activities will focus on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking if you utilize the umbrella term of sexual harassment to represent these crimes. Trainings, conferences, or materials focused primarily on Title IX and not on the crimes themselves. Certainly, campuses can propose policy development, response protocols, including clarifying reporting structures and ongoing trainings to address domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, since they are covered under Title IX. But this grant is not meant to support Title IX compliance, and as such should not be the focus of grant activities. Applications must clearly state that the activities are focused on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. To utilize the term Title IX as an umbrella term is not synonymous with identifying that these crimes are being addressed. Purchase of anonymous web-based reporting systems. It excludes law enforcement incident and report databases or apps for students. Applicants can include reporting systems that are for law enforcement use or information systems for victim services, as long as the information included can be kept confidential. Information is not disclosed without the victim's consent, and victims can opt out of including personally identifying information. Please review the full list of out-of-scope activities on page 9 of the solicitation prior to writing your application to ensure you do not include any of the listed activities in your project. We strongly urge you to review carefully the information we have just discussed. We have seen applications miss the funding cutoff score by just 1 point because one of these activities was included in the application. Next slide. While unallowable activities are listed on page 33, there are 2 common unallowable activities seen in proposals. Tuition reimbursement in lieu of salary of project staff. We often see this for graduate assistant positions. Second, fundraising. Applicants often include fundraising for the local victim services organization. While we like to see this type of collaboration between campus and the community partner, these activities cannot be supported as part of grant-funded events or activities. Now we will stop to answer any questions you may have about priority areas, activities that compromise victim safety, unallowable and out-of-scope activities. Please send your questions in English or Spanish via the chat box.
The first question, for the second priority area, to improve outreach, do we specifically need to address how we will serve LGBTQ+ and immigrant communities, or can we focus efforts on other underserved communities? For example, students with disabilities.
Hi, this is Jeff Neal from OVW. The applicant can focus on who their underserved population is. We actually give examples in our solicitation. So if your underserved population is someone other than what we have listed, you can focus on that particular underserved population on your campus.
Title IX has changed away from mandatory reporting, which is beneficial for victims so they can guide their choices. Are you saying you are requiring mandatory reporting? No, we are not requiring mandatory reporting. The next question is, you mentioned how to discuss safety planning, but there is no longer a question asking about safety planning. Where should we address safety planning? That was an example when we were discussing how campus could endanger a survivor in an unsafe situation or compromising their safety. You can discuss safety planning and what might be your needs and opportunities of growth in the application during the narrative portion of the application. The next comment reads, a new purpose area includes the following, including personnel from the Title IX Coordinator's Office, Student Conduct Office, and campus disciplinary or judicial boards on such policies, protocols, and services that promote a prompt, fair, and impartial investigation, new to FY23, but support for Title IX investigator or coordinator positions and trainings, conference activities, or materials focused primarily on Title IX is an out-of-scope activity. Can you clarify what is within the scope of the grant? I can also take this question. One of the minimum requirements is to provide ongoing training to all the personnel that is involved in the investigation process and hearings of campus misconduct. The out-of-scope activity is to focus activities that are primarily on Title IX. We do recognize that Title IX coordinators may be part of that personnel that has responsibilities around hearings and investigators. The out-of-scope activity is just to focus on Title IX, which is already an institutional responsibility beyond having or not the campus program. And we cannot support Title IX coordination salaries or their position. And I think that those are all the questions so far. Anyone else from the team, let me know if that's correct. Okay, Veronica, we can move on. We can continue.
Next slide, please. Next, we will delve into award information to consider as you develop your proposal. Next slide. The grant award period is for 36 months, tentatively beginning on October 1st, 2023, and ending on September 30th, 2026. Applicants should submit applications with project activities and budgets that reflect this period. OVW estimates that it will make up to 25 awards with an estimated 10 million. In FY 2023, awards will be made up to $400,000 for the entire 36 months. OVW has the discretion to make awards for greater or lesser amounts than requested and to negotiate the scope of work and budget with applicants prior to making an award. Next slide. Both new and continuation applications are being accepted. New applications are those that have never received funding under the campus program as a lead institution or whose previous funding expired on or before March 31st, 2022. Continuation applications are those that have an existing campus grant or whose campus grant closed after March 31st, 2022. Grantees that were awarded a campus grant in FY 2021 and FY 2022 are not eligible to apply as the lead applicant or be a partner or subrecipient of an FY 2023 proposal under this program. In addition, satellite or branch campuses of an institution are not considered separate institutions. Therefore, an institution with multiple satellite or branch locations must apply as a single applicant. The campus program has eliminated the restriction on the number of times a campus can receive funding. As such, applicants that have received 3 or more prior cycles of funding will be supported in FY 2023. Next slide. Refer to the full list on pages 12 through 14 of the solicitation for information on the mandatory requirements. The requirements included must be completed by all applicants funded under this program. The requirements include OVW-sponsored technical assistance, including trainings and webinars and the new grantee orientation, statutory and other program requirements, and staffing requirements. Next slide. Statutory requirements. There are 4 statutory requirements that all applicants must certify that they will implement when applying for funding. If you have applied previously or have current funding, it is important to note that these requirements have changed as a result of VAWA 2022. Applicants must create a coordinated community response, CCR, to these crimes, establish a mandatory prevention and education program for all students to include training for incoming students, bystander training, and ongoing prevention efforts. Provide ongoing training to all campus law enforcement, and provide ongoing training to all participants in the resolution process, including the Campus Disciplinary Board, Title IX Coordinator's Office, and the Student Conduct Office. This means that investigators and individuals responsible for appeals and sanctioning must attend. If funded at the end of your award, you must demonstrate that your campus met these requirements with or without grant funding. Next slide. Other mandatory program requirements. Applicants that receive funding under the campus program are required to engage in and provide other required activities throughout the award period. Applicants you must also offer confidential victim services and advocacy. This requirement is to provide access to 24-hour confidential victim services and advocacy to survivors of these crimes, regardless of whether the services are located on campus, co-located, or as a referral relationship with a community partner. Applicants must also work closely with OVW technical assistance providers throughout the entire project period. And finally, applicants must adhere to the following project requirements. Next slide. New grantees will engage in a 1-year planning period. This means that implementation activities cannot be conducted. This is important to consider in your budget development. As your campus considers activities in the implementation phase of the project, these activities should be budgeted for 2 years, not 3. We'll attend a minimum of 5 trainings and 1 new grantee orientation. These events should be described in your budget. No more than 3 people should attend the orientation. Regarding the 5 trainings, 3 trainings will be held in the first year, 1 training in year 2, and the remaining training in the last year. For the first year trainings, 6 to 7 people are required to attend. For the remaining 2 trainings, 4 people are required to attend. Finally, must support a project director, at least 0.75 FTE. During this dedicated time, the project director should be working on grant implementation activities only. It is the campus discretion if it wants to support this position at the higher FTE with or without grant funding. Continuation grantees must implement new activities beyond the statutory and program requirements. This will be addressed after award. Must support a project director at least 0.50 FTE, unless a justification can be provided that less time won't impede project implementation. For both new and continuation grantees, a supervision requirement exists. The project director should not be supervised or housed in the Title IX office or with any position serving a Title IX role. There is no exception to this requirement at this time. In addition, the project director must not be a Title IX coordinator, victim advocate, or serve in a confidential advisor role. Now we will stop to answer any questions you have about award amounts, types of applications, statutory and other program requirements. Please remember to send your questions via the chat box in English or Spanish, or you may verbally ask your questions by raising your hand using the reaction icon at the bottom of your screen.
The first question is, there are several mandatory program requirements or activities. In the What Will Be Done section, should our proposal narrative include a reference to these requirements and then describe our unique activities, or should we list all of these as well? The grantees should address them and include them in their proposal narrative, but if awarded, we will spend time during the first year working on strategic planning to build the campus capacity and work together with our technical assistance providers to define those activities that will help you meet the grant requirements. The next question is, are the mandatory program requirements listed on pages 14 and 17 prerequisites for applying? In other words, does an institution have to have all of these items in place in order to be considered for funding, or can they write plans to develop these program requirements in the grant application and still be considered? The goal of the campus program is to support campuses to enhance and increase their response to the crimes. So the institution can describe what is it that they have in place, and what are their areas of need where the campus program will allow to strengthen their response. So you can certainly plan to develop some of the requirements as part of the application. The next question is, does OVW use a specific definition of a coordinated community response for the purpose of this grant? Or can any convened body of internal and external partners working to address domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking be considered a CCR?
I can answer to that, Maria Cristina. Yes, we have a specific definition for what CCR is, but you don't need to define or address this in the application. You would need to follow the required CCR team members to be part of the grant, and we will address more after the award.
Yes, the next question is in reference to the second requirement. Do we need to enforce mandatory bystander intervention for all students, or do we just need to have a bystander workshop that is available to all students? And the answer to that is that the institution does have to have a bystander workshop that is available to all students.
Christina,
Yes.
this is Jess. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to add to that question there. In order to receive prevention credit for the prevention activities that we have listed in our solicitation, you must conduct all three of those activities and all three of those elements listed in our solicitation. So for example, you're speaking about bystander intervention, but again, we also have other elements under the prevention requirement in the solicitation that must be adhered to as well.
Thank you, Jessica. The next question reads, we will have a difficulty hiring a qualified project director at 0.75 FTE with the limited budget. Once indirect cost and the required $60K for travel are taken out, that leaves about $263K only. We are located in the New York City metro area where cost of living requires higher salaries than this budget would support. Salary plus taxes and benefits. And it would leave us with almost no funds for program implementation. Have you any guidance to offer? We recognize that's a challenge, and we would be happy to connect individually over email to explore some options. One of them could be to lower the indirect cost that will be charged to the grant, but we could certainly explore more ideas as this is a very specific challenge to an institution. The next question reads, the priority area mentions immigrants. How are you defining immigrant at OVW? We have a high population of international students, but they are not necessarily immigrants. Do they count? International students are not the same as immigrants. So those are two different potential underserved populations, but international students are not considered immigrants. Then the next question is, does the project director need to be in place at the time of the grant being awarded, or can they be hired during the 1-year planning period?
I can go ahead and take that one. No, the project director does not need to be in place at the time of the award. They can be hired once the award has been received within that 1 year, hopefully earlier, hopefully not too late into the year, but yeah.
Thank you. The next question reads, did you say 3 people should attend the new grantee orientation?
Yes.
During the presentation, we said that at least up to 3 should attend the new grantee orientation.
No more than 3.
Correct. Yes. Which trainings require 6-7 people and which requires 3 and 4? So we will have 5 training and technical institutes. The first 3 require at least 6 to 7 people, and the last 2 require at least 3 or 4. For the matters of the application, the most important thing is to ensure that you're allocating the minimum amount required for travel, which is $60,000. The next question reads, how many days are each of the trainings and where are they held? Usually the trainings last 3 to 4 days. Once awarded, you will have access to more information, and they are held in different parts of the states. We don't have that information right now. The next question reads, can you restate for continuation how many people must attend the trainings? That's something that will be determined once the continuation award is given. At this point, we cannot say how many people would attend the training, but continuation applicants do need to include in their budget the required travel amount.
Hi, Maria.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is Jessica. I was going to say, for the essence of time, given the webinar that we have and the presentation that we still have to cover, we do need to move our presentation forward, but we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. If we are unable to get to your questions at the end of the presentation, You may email us at the OVW campus email box, and we will definitely respond to your inquiries at that time.
Thank you, Jessica. Application and submission information. Next slide. Please refer to the solicitation beginning on page 19 for specific information related to the content and format of application submission. All applicants must include following 5 components: a project narrative, a budget detail worksheet and narrative, memoranda of understanding to include both external and internal MOUs, certification of eligibility, and certification of statutory minimum requirements. If applicable, a certification of legal assistance must be also submitted. Applications that do not include these components will be considered substantially incomplete and will not be considered for funding. Next slide. The summary data sheet provides a brief snapshot of your project. This data is used in the initial review of your application. While this document is not scored and doesn't count towards the 20-page limit, it is important to capture key information about your institution and the proposed project in a summary data sheet. Next slide. The project narrative consists of 3 sections: purpose of application, what will be done, and who will implement. All combined, the project narrative is worth a total of 55 points and is the bulk of the application. The project narrative must be double-spaced. This component of the application submission is where applicants provide detailed information related to the proposed project. Before I get into each section of the proposal narrative, it is important to discuss the page limit. It is imperative that you are mindful of the formatting. See page 20 for specifics, and the number of allowable pages. The project narrative can include charts, which can be single-spaced. However, charts should be used sparingly and not make up most of the narrative. Peer reviewers are instructed to stop reading and scoring this section at the page limit. You do not want to lose valuable points due to going over the page limit. With that said, the proposal narrative should be no more than 20 pages. The project narrative is designed in the following way. Each section begins with criteria that all applicants must address, followed by criteria that must be addressed based on your applicant type. Next slide. Purpose of the proposal. This section describes the need for the project and helps reviewers understand your specific campus community needs. Common mistakes include providing too much information that is not relevant to the proposed project, or not enough information to be responsive to what is being asked. Follow the guidance on pages 28 of the solicitation to ensure you are providing the required information. Also, keep in mind that this section counts towards the page limit. You want to be sure that you're being responsive to the questions in this section, while at the same time ensuring you have enough pages remaining to provide detailed information on the proposed project. We have seen applications where the applicant used more pages to describe the need for the project than the number of pages to describe the project activities to address the problem. Strong applications find the balance between justifying the need and providing detailed information on how the need will be addressed. Continuation applicants should address what efforts they have done previously to meet the statutory and program requirements, but also what gaps remain and how you want to build on previous efforts such that you're seeking funding again. Next slide. This is the section, what will be done. This is the section where you will describe what you're going to do with the grant funds. This year, we have changed some of the criteria in this section because we know that awarded institutions will be developing a strategic plan during the first year of the award. As such, we have reduced criteria in this section to key information that we want to know about your project. You should provide detailed information that clearly describes the activities and strategies to support your proposed project. Information provided in this section should be clear and detailed so that reviewers understand how the project will fully address the components listed. For example, there is a difference between stating we offer victim services by partnering with community victim services organization versus victim services are offered by the ex-rape crisis center who provides crisis intervention, court accompaniment, legal advocacy, and representation, safety planning, risk and lethality assessments for domestic violence victims. Next slide. Some common mistakes to avoid in this section are not fully answering the criteria in the proposal. Sometimes applicants will answer only part of the criteria, which results in partial credit when assessing your proposal in the application review. Not including concrete activities and strategies that will be developed and or implemented to meet OVW priority area that the applicant has identified on the summary data sheet section. Next slide. Who will implement the project? In this section, the applicant should identify who are the key individuals, departments, and organizations involved in the proposed project. This section does not list all of the partners on this project. All partners should be reflected in the MOUs. This section must demonstrate that the individuals, departments, and organizations identified have the capacity to address the stated needs and can successfully implement the proposed project activities. Therefore, providing details on their expertise and experience is critical here. In addition, clearly specify each organization's and individual's role in the project. If you're planning to hire one of the key positions, provide a brief description of the experience you hope they have and the responsibility of this position. In FY2023, you will notice that we added criteria in this section regarding the commitment, dedicated time, and use of the project supervisor's position to obtain leadership buy-in and support for the project activities. We have found that the project supervisor is equally important in ensuring the successful launch and continued progress in the project. If you are addressing the priority area related to underserved populations, you must identify the campus and or community partner with expertise working with the identified underserved population and the services they provide to meet the needs of this population. As a friendly reminder, this section is also part of the page limit. Make sure to keep this section focused on who is involved in the major project activities and who is most responsible for ensuring the goals and objectives of the proposed project are met. The biggest common mistake here is the lack of details regarding the demonstrated experience and expertise of key personnel, including not providing roles and expertise of individual departments and organization in this section, but pointing to the MOU. Applicants miss receiving points in this section because the required information is included in the MOU instead of in the project narrative. And as such, the points associated with the criteria in the section will not be applied if located elsewhere. Now we will stop to answer any questions you may have about application submission information, summary data sheet, and project narrative.
And we keep going, Veronica, in the interest of time. We'll take questions at the end.
Absolutely. Budget detail worksheet and narrative. Next slide. It is important to know that applicants will be submitting an attachment for the budget within Just Grants. We are not using the web-based budget as we have done in previous years. During the peer review process, the reviewers will be assessing and scoring the budgets to ensure the program requirements are met and do not include any unallowable activities and/or expenses. It is the applicant's responsibility to read this section thoroughly in order to submit a proper budget. Applicants must submit reasonable budget based on the resources needed to implement their proposed project. The budget should display a clear link between the specific project activities and the proposed budget items. Specifically, the budget should not contain any items that are not detailed in the project narrative. The budget narrative must support all costs included in the budget and explain how the costs of goods and services are determined and how they will fulfill the overall project objective of the project. The budget must reflect 36 months of project activity, should include funds to attend mandatory campus program training and technical assistance in the amount of $60,000, with an additional $10,000 added for applicants from the U.S. territories, Alaska, or Hawaii. Applicants may include more than the minimum amounts. Should not exceed the budget caps, should not contain a match. Developing the budget, applicants should financially compensate all project partners for their participation in any project-related activities, including, but not limited to, compensation for time and travel expenses to participate in project development, training, and implementation. The budget must include compensation for all services rendered by project partners, including the victim service provider. If a partner is a state, local, tribal, or territorial agency, and the partnership duties are conducted within the course of the agency's regular scope of work, the applicant does not need to compensate the partner if an explanation of this arrangement is included in the budget and external memorandum of understanding. In the budget, the applicant should include in the budget narrative that no compensation from the grant will be utilized. The budget should also include funds to ensure project activities and materials are accessible to individuals with disabilities and students with limited English proficiency. For example, videos could be closed captioned and translated into other languages. Written materials could be translated into two different languages. Interpreters could be made available at the events and are in the process of providing direct victim services for those who are deaf, hard of hearing, or speak a language other than English. Please see pages 31 to 34 of the solicitation, which provides detailed information on how to develop and submit your budget for your proposed project. In addition, the OVW website has a budget sample for your reference. Please keep in mind that this is a sample used for all OVW programs, so it may include things that are unallowable for this program, but it is a good reference to organize your budget, provide clear computation, and demonstrate detailed justifications for all proposed expenses. Indirect costs under the campus program have been revised, but are limited to no more than 20% of modified total direct costs. This limit applies to both direct recipients and subrecipients of campus program funds. Project director. New applicants must have and/or support one project director position at least 0.75 FTE. Continuation applicants should allocate at least 0.50 FTE for the project director. However, if you want to allocate less time, a justification must be provided if the project director's time is less than 50% to ensure the project can be adequately implemented and is not hindered by the reduced time on the project. Technical assistance. All campus program grantees will be required to attend a total of 5 training and technical assistance institutes over the 3-year grant period. As such, we require applicants to set aside at the minimum $60,000 to attend these mandatory trainings. There will be 3 institutes in the first year, 1 in year 2, and 1 institute in the last year of the award. All grantees are required to bring a multidisciplinary team to the institutes. The institutes are designed for grantees to work in teams and develop the competencies necessary to implement program activities on their respective campuses. Since trainings will occur across the United States, and if you need assistance calculating costs, then applicants can use Washington, D.C. as its base site for computation. Typically, budget for 4 nights of a hotel stay. For the NGO, there is 2 to 3 people who attend. For the training institutes, 6 to 7 people are required for the first 3 trainings, and 4 people are required to attend the last 2 trainings. Victim services. If you're proposing to develop, implement, or strengthen victim services, then the budget should include 20% of grant funds dedicated to that activity. It must be allocated for direct services to survivors and cannot include outreach and training activities. Assessment. If you are proposing to do a needs assessment or evaluation of efforts, you are limited to no more than 3% of your budget for this purpose. Lastly, a friendly word of advice. Please do not divide grant funding by year. This format in implementation creates more challenges when activities cross grant years and requires approval from OVW to update the budget. Again, my best advice is to follow the sample budget provided to applicants. Now, I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine, Michael Sterling. He is a grant financial analyst in the Grants Financial Management Division, also known as GFMD in OVW. He's going to provide you with additional information on the financial requirements of the solicitation. Michael?
Thank you. Next slide, please. In the next couple slides, we're going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to the documents that our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, or known as GFMD, reviews. More specifically, we'll discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior year's applications that can help with expediting our reviewing process. So for today, we're going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. First, we'll highlight the items identified in the data requested with application, which is completed by all applicants in a survey in Just Grants. A list of questions included in the survey appears at the end of the solicitation under the heading Survey Questions or Data Requested with Applications. Applicants should click on the survey name, Pre-Award Risk Assessment, to access and complete the survey in Just Grants. Specifically, two items we would like to discuss are the single audit response and the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure. OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If they have, then they indicate that and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. However, GFMD is finding that applicants do not always include all of the information. Please ensure that the question is answered in its entirety on the data requested with application survey. Another item we would like to highlight from the solicitation is specifically for nonprofit organizations. If you use the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive's compensation, you are required to provide a disclosure letter. Page 15 of the solicitation provides further details and a link to a sample of the letter. Note that there are four required parts to the disclosure letter. The sample letter outlines all 4 parts of the disclosure. So please make sure to follow the sample and provide a response to each of the 4 pieces. Next item that we'd like to discuss is the pre-award risk assessment survey, which assists GFMD during their pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 11 questions, and each question has multiple parts. We've noticed from prior years that applicants do not always fully answer each part of the questions, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant and in which may delay funding decisions. Some of the most common issues that we've encountered have been, for example, question 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but do not provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. Another question, on question 3, some applicants fail to provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it's tracked budgeted versus actual expenditures. These are just a few examples, but in general, Please make sure that you read each piece of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. Next slide, please. In this next slide, we'll quickly highlight some resources that are available as you are creating your budget to be submitted with your application. Over the last few years, GFMD has developed a detailed webinar presentation on how to develop a budget to be submitted with your OVW application. This presentation addresses some of the challenges that you may face with your budgets and provides some insight on OVW's budget review process. This webinar can be found on the link available here on this slide. Next up is the uniform guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR Part 200. Use your favorite search engine to find this one. Other resources include our DOJ financial guide and the solicitation itself. Next slide, please. We know that this can be a lot of information to process. So if you have any questions about the GFMD information discussed, please feel free to contact us at the GFMD Help Desk at 888-514-8556 or by email at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. Thank you.
Hey, Michael, before you go, we're going to jump into questions. This is Latanisha speaking.
All right.
There is a question for you. So the question says, the solicitation says that applicants that have not previously or within the last 3 years received funding from OVW must complete an applicant financial capability questionnaire. Is the 3-year period from the start of the prior award or at the end of the prior award? They've had a grant before, so they're not sure.
It would be from the end of the prior award. So if that previous award is still active, then you would not fall into completing that form.
Michael, this is Latanisha again. I think that's the only GFMD question we have so far. Hold tight. There's another question from Kelly that says, in the solicitation, there were pre-award risk questions that we are working on. Are these the same questions in Just Grants, or do we upload it to Just Grants?
Yes, those will be the same questions on there. I believe in Just Grants, you are able to just copy and paste. So if you're working on them outside of the system, you should have the ability to copy and paste your responses into Just Grants.
All right. I know we have a few minutes left, so I'll turn it back to Maria Cristina. We'll try to answer a few of your questions that in the chat.
Yes, if you are awarded, you will receive more information on who should attend to the new grantee orientation. You will also receive support on how to meet all the mandatory requirements. And we will also give you training on how you track those activities for grant purposes. At this point, the focus should be writing the grant and justifying the need for it, how it will benefit your institution. For the purposes of the time that can be compensated for staff in the grant, you cannot combine the roles of victim services provider, including advocacy, with the project director. They need to be separate roles, separate persons, 2 different persons at least. The planning period is for 1 year, and then activities will be implemented once your strategic plan is approved, and that will be covered if you are awarded the grant. As for the role of students in the coordinated community response team, that is also something that we would cover more in depth if you're awarded as part of the capacity building, training, and activities that will be provided during the Training and Technical Assistance Institutes. The TTI attendance requirements apply to new grantees, and it is to be determined to continuing grantees, but they still have to include the resources to attend the mandatory training. Continuation applications need to include the travel resources, although we will determine the TTI attendance afterwards. You can list the travel resources. You can provide a general information and justification in terms of what would those funds cover, like per diem, lodging, airfare, mileage reimbursement, transportation, etc. But we don't need specifics right now because we don't know the locations yet. And this varies among institutions. For the law enforcement training, that is also something that we would discuss further during the first year of the application. We don't require a specific number of trainings, only that those are ongoing. The project narrative should be no more than 20 pages, and the solicitation includes what we require you to include there. So review that. We don't require you to include a logic model in your narrative, but if you want to do so, you're more than welcome to do so. Yes, the college can apply for SAM and show the proof of the application prior to the deadline, but as you have this information now, please make sure to apply for that as soon as possible. The project director will be the person implementing and facilitating the work of the grant under the campus program. That is to work towards meeting all the mandatory requirements and the additional requirements described in the solicitation. The project supervisor is the person that will supervise the work and provide guidance and oversight to the implementation. Compensation for partners must be something that you communicate with them before you enter the memorandum of understanding. Cameras, blue light phones, network equipment could be purchased through this program only in the context of enhancing the campus response and prevention to dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. I think that we got most of your questions. Like Jessica says in the chat, if you have questions, send us an email to ovw.campus@usdoj.gov, and do make sure to review all the solicitation. It includes a lot of information, so please make sure to review that carefully. And many thanks to our ASL interpreters, our Spanish interpreters, for the services that you provided today. And thank you, Veronica, Michael, and all the Leidos staff for your presentations and all the technical support during this pre-application call.